many of us feel like we need to have every single detail figured out before we start something? I know I sure do. In fact, if this is the first time you are listening to the Maker's Playbook podcast, you will soon figure out I am awfully, probably obsessively, type A for being a creative person. And while at times that has served me really well in systematizing processes and being organized in order to use my time efficiently, well, at other times, it slowed me down. Analyzing every single pro and con to every single website platform out there for months and months and months before just simply starting the darn thing. Does it sound familiar? It can be scary to start. So I think, at least what's true for me, is that we give ourselves a false feeling of security by analyzing things until the last breath, thinking we can solve every possible problem that might come up before we even start, when really, you just might have to start in order to figure it all out. At least that was the case for this week's podcast guest, Juliette Davin of Juliette's Wheelhouse. This was a super fun chat for me, especially because Juliette was one of our founding members inside of the community. Not was, she is. She is one of our founding members inside of the community, which is our online membership where makers from all over the world are chatting, brainstorming, and supporting each other on this crazy adventure of trying to figure out how to make a living from the things we make. And to bring everything full circle before we dive in here, it was actually thanks to one of our community members that I was introduced to the team at Amico, who is currently sponsoring this very podcast. You may have noticed that Amico isn't taking direct orders on their website currently, and while that may seem like a bad thing, the reason for it is pretty awesome. For the past 8 months, Amico has been focusing on supplying their distributors first. In other words, they're focused on making sure your favorite local shop is supported before even their own website. And you can easily pick up your favorite glazes like Potter's Choice Honey Flux or Rainforest Celadon on the shelf at your local clay shop and avoid extra shipping costs in the process. Naturally, high demand and supply issues have made it hard to keep stores stocked these days. But Amico is dedicated to supporting your favorite small businesses first, now and in the future. And that, my friends, is putting your money where your values are. And you know I am all about that. If you don't yet have a favorite local shop, you can find an Amico distributor near you by visiting amico.com/dealers. A big thanks to the team at Amico for supporting the Maker's Playbook podcast. Speaking of which, let's get on with the show. Welcome to the Maker's Playbook, the podcast where we talk all about what it's really like to make a living from the things you make. I'm your host, Rebecca Ikes-Kara. Hey, Juliette, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Rebecca. Great to be here.
This is fabulous. We should probably make this should actually become a video podcasting. I'm not going to, because then I have to shower and put on makeup every time, but
that would be fun.
I feel bad. People are missing out on some very entertaining content right now.
I know.
Before we lose track of ourselves, because I think that might happen this time, how would you introduce yourself to all the people actually listening rather than me sitting here looking at you?
All right. Well, my name is Juliette Davin, and I'm a ceramic artist, and I live in Houston, Texas.
Fabulous. How long have you been a ceramic artist?
That's kind of there's a long answer to that. I was interested in art starting in high school. I had a fabulous art teacher that kind of steered me towards graphic design. I did drawing and painting and everything. And she's actually still a good friend of mine now, which is a lot of fun. Yeah. So anyway, got my Bachelor of Fine Arts in studio art. I was a graphic designer, but never in all of my other art classes, just never worked out in my schedule to take anything with clay. So I had never touched clay. And after graduated, got married, we were living in Louisiana, and there was an evening class, and I took a 6-week little intro, and I was like, whoa, I'm hooked. And then we got the news that we were being transferred to Bangkok, Thailand. So I bought a wheel and had an old little used kiln and brought them with me.
I was just going to say, you bought a wheel before you moved to Thailand?
Yes. Yes.
Very light packing. Very
Oh
small
no, we had a
suitcase.
shipment, so I was able to throw those in the shipment. But that's about it. You know, a handful of tools and things. This is before YouTube or any social media or anything. So I had that 6-week intro course, and then I was on the path of teaching myself. So books, I had some good books. I lived for getting Pottery Making Illustrated. It was a lot of trial and error. So there are a lot of potters in Thailand. There are a lot of ceramic artists that are full-time who don't necessarily have time to teach a class. So I had a couple of little workshops here and there, but for the most part, it was reading a lot of books, looking at a lot of pictures, and a lot of trial and error.
When did you guys move to Thailand? When was that?
In 1992. So yeah, this
Amazing.
is a long time ago.
Well, and just to give everybody context, what was it that you said transferred? So is your
my
partner in the military?
Yeah, no, oil and gas. So we moved to Thailand, and we were there for about 7 years. So back in Houston for a short time, and then to Balikpapan on the island of Borneo, the Indonesian side of Borneo, and then for 2 years, and then Jakarta. So I did it there too. So having kids and doing pottery off and on, and then we moved back to the States in 2008, and everything went in a barn for 10 years. Everything sat. I didn't touch clay, didn't do anything. And then all of a sudden in 2018, kids are off at college, and I have an extra room that I can turn into a studio. So pull everything out of storage and get started again. But it was a whole different world. I mean, it was, Instagram and Facebook and YouTube and all of these things that I could just, soak up information from. And it was great to get started again.
Did it feel like relearning because was it like information overwhelm? Because I feel like the internet has its pros and cons,
yes,
right? Learning from a book where someone had to be approved to be published,
right,
is kind of a little bit more barrier to entry, but also maybe more structured teaching than scrolling through Instagram and being like, whose techniques are useful?
Structured teaching in a way, but being a visual learner, you learn so much more from watching somebody do something and then trying it than seeing still pictures in series of, a technique or something. So I had to work really hard to get to where I was at that point with a lot of trial and error. If I had had somebody to teach me, it probably would have gone a lot faster. So, you could see what you were doing wrong and somebody else could see what you were doing wrong and you could discuss it, or maybe not wrong, but ways to improve.
So before we get too into the weeds on the actual ceramic side of things, the logistical portion of my brain is trying to wrap its head around moving a household, a family, a wheel, a kiln, all of these things, not once, but 3. I mean, I'm not counting coming back to Houston now. It seems like you guys maybe might, I don't know, maybe you'll have to move again. But that's a very short period of time and some very big moves.
Those are huge moves. Those are really big moves. My husband was working for Chevron, and they help you out a lot. They have movers come in and pack. And when you have something more specialized, like a wheel or a kiln, they kind of know how to handle it, kind of. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Depends on which side you're talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, because then you have the electrical, you've got the wattage situation of arriving to another country,
yes,
and you've got a wheel made for U.S. outlets.
You had to make sure it was both 50, 60 hertz, and whether it was going to be on a transformer, if it had a motor, it had to be able to cycle both 50 or 60 hertz or be 110, 220 switchable. Yep. My kiln, the second time around when we came back to the States, moved to Indonesia, I bought a new kiln. And that's the kiln I still have. So I bought it specifically with the 240 voltage. And I just had to change the elements when I came back. So, and the plug, I had to make sure that I had the right kind of plug for what we could get on the island of Borneo.
Just small shipping problem. No big deal. Have the wrong plug, get there, and I don't know what the delivery date. I don't know that you've got Amazon Prime coming to Borneo necessarily, but this is just my very white self making assumptions.
Well, and the funny thing is that I couldn't get any supplies there. I could find some supplies in Thailand and limited in Indonesia, but Singapore had a lot. Or if my husband was traveling back to those States, he would bring me stuff. But only once did I ask him to bring me some glaze supplies because, and also coming from Singapore into Indonesia, going through customs with bags of white powder was not always the easiest thing.
Can't imagine why.
I know.
Can't imagine.
Even in the language, when I was trying to explain what they were, and you'll get a kick out of this.
Yeah.
And every Potter will get a kick out of this. But we're going back and forth with, I actually had some stoneware clay that I brought with me too, just from Singapore, a quick flight. But we had to go every 5 weeks to get the kids' braces tightened and stuff. So I would go and pick up supplies and kind of ferry them back to Indonesia. We're coming through customs, and there's some bags of white powder, and there's some blocks of clay. And I've got 5 customs officials just shaking their heads, scratching their head and kind of looking at, what is this? And I'm trying to tell them in Bahasa Indonesia that it's ceramic. Finally, this guy turns to me and goes, "Oh, sama-sama ghost?" I was like, oh no. I'm like, yep, sama-sama ghost.
You can't get away from it anywhere.
No, you really can't. Nowhere on the planet can you get away from the ghost jokes connection.
Oh my gosh.
I
That's
know.
fantastic. That's hilarious.
So,
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we hit record too, you did mention that you were teaching while you guys were abroad. So did you start teaching ceramics, or
No,
is that
I was-
another side to Juliette?
that's another side. I've got lots of different things. I was teaching 5th grade.
Yep.
So at the international school in Jakarta.
Oh my gosh. So studied graphic design, which I didn't know, which is hilarious because that's what I switched to out of the music school. My degree's in graphic design
Okay.
because that was like the employable art,
Mhm.
right?
Oh,
Like that
right.
was the safe choice.
Yes. That's what I was pushed
Yeah.
towards. Because I mean, I knew, I love to draw and paint and stuff, but you have to have a certain passion for it and be good enough to really, for somebody to say, oh, you should do that as a living. But it
Yep.
was art in general was my passion. And I'm very, when you look at my work, you can probably see the graphic designer in me, a lot of the meticulous, the lines and the patterns and things that are measured. And yeah, so
It all makes sense to me now because even the composition of your consideration of the shape and the composition of that shape and then the composition of the designs you're putting on that shape, I'm like, oh, yes. Now this.
now it makes sense.
You got taught the rule of thirds, didn't
Oh,
you?
yeah. And I got taught the rule of thirds with a ruler and a rapidograph pen and, just starting on computers. In the late 80s, I graduated college in 1990 and everything was done by hand. So we cut and pasted, and which has served me really well. I mean, I'm good with an X-Acto knife and I'm good with figuring out, the measurements of everything so that everything fits right. And, just kind of going back to those roots. So
That's really interesting because I've been thinking a lot about this in terms of like how almost the second or the third things in life that we try to do are where you can sometimes find a lot more success because you're starting to pile on these different
Yes.
skill sets that maybe at first felt disparate, but actually really come together. So that makes a lot of sense to me. So now I'm trying to layer on all the facets. So were you teaching art for 5th graders or just all of the
No,
subjects?
I was teaching all of the
Or-
subject. I originally thought, going back to my high school art teacher, love you, Laura Costa, she's, but really made me believe I wanted to be an art teacher in high
Mhm.
school. And that's kind of was in the back of my mind that at some point I wanted to do that. And, if I could just influence one person the same way she influenced me, I thought that's, that would be a great goal. So when we got to Jakarta, I started looking into being the art teacher there. And then I started realizing I don't think I want to have a revolving door where I get to spend 45 minutes with every kid from every class, from all the grades. I would rather try to bring a love of art into the classroom along with the other subjects and stuff and I really loved 5th grade. 5th grade was just a really neat age, I think. So that's where I kind of ended up. I mean, I was doing some subbing and stuff, and it just kind of ended up, I kind of went, yeah, I don't really get to know the kids as well at the kind of elementary school level. I mean, maybe I would have on a high school level, but I kind of jumped down to the elementary side and went, maybe I could have a bigger impact being with the kids all day. So most of the day.
I was just trying to think about the age of 5th grade because when I was in the UK, I worked with 8 to 12-year-olds.
10-year-olds. Yep.
And I remember like emotionally as a junior high student, that was like the worst. I mean, people talk about like high school being rough, but I actually think junior high is way
I think
more
middle
difficult.
school. So 5th grade was perfect. You're the big fish in the little pond. You don't have cooties anymore. The boys and girls are starting to work together, but they're not really in the throes of puberty where there's a lot of that kind of tension going on. And it's just, you can really see a lot of these, the wheels turning and clicking, and I don't know, just day to day, the growth. And you can have some really, awesome conversations with them and stuff. So that's where I kind of ended up after doing a lot of subbing in different grades.
So then when you guys came back, you've been back now since 2018, right? I'm getting my...
No, 2008.
Okay.
Yeah.
2008. Okay. So then when you came back, did you go into teaching once you came home, or kind of walk us from then to now?
Yep. So I did for a year. I was back for a year and we kind of adjusted. And then the school that my son was in, he was in 7th grade at the time, needed a 4th grade teacher. All of a sudden, they had a teacher that was put on bed rest with a pregnancy and they just needed somebody yesterday. So they asked and I took it over after the 2nd week of school started in the fall. And then I finished the whole year with that grade. And then I always thought that my kids, when we moved back, they were going into 6th grade, into middle school and then high school. And they'd never lived in the States before. They were born in Thailand. And I mean, they had the year and a half, almost 2 years that we spent when they were 3 and 5, I don't really count because they don't remember it. So their formative years up to that point were overseas. But I still thought at the age they didn't really need me at home as much, not like the younger kids do, but I think they needed me more, just in a different way. So I taught for a year and decided not to go back. It was a hard transition for everybody, for them as kids to move to a country they'd never lived in. So
well, and culturally and like day to day, I'm sure.
Right. Everybody, expects them to understand the culture that they're living in because they sound like they're American, but they'd never lived here. It was difficult. There was a transition. So, for all of us.
That's fascinating. And I'm going to have more questions, but I feel like I should stay the court. Everyone's going to be like, what is this subject of
I know.
this? I'm like, we'll focus on making, and I'm going to ask about the international child rearing.
Anytime.
In the community. We'll DM in the community at some point.
Yeah.
Which I should explain briefly because I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit to anybody who is just coming around to my little slice of the internet for the first time. We have a online membership platform called The Community. Juliette was one of the first people in there. You were like in this founding group. Unlike online courses and things that we have to have like a doors open day and a doors closed, the community is just open all the time. You can come when you want. You can stay for how long it's kind of a rolling monthly thing. So if you want to come for 1 month and leave for another and come back, whatever, you can do whatever you want. And then we have these monthly themes where we like talk about, I think the very first month was Instagram. Right now we're talking about pricing.
Right. Before, there was time management and packing and shipping. So really, it's been really good.
Okay, so speaking of packing and shipping, were you making stuff did you bring ceramics home from all of these places around the world?
Only as gifts.
Because it's not like making jewelry.
No, I know. No, only as gifts. I would sometimes bring some home. Of course, the parents needed to get some things, but I did sell some things there. Yep. It's a little more touchy because you're not really supposed to, but there were a lot of gifts involved because I didn't have a work permit, and everything. There were more donation related, for the American Women's Club and the British Women's Club and market days where we could sell or donate things.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
But otherwise, no, it was in general. I mean, I've done my share of packing things and, packing and moving things around. And that was not something I wanted to do. So
that's why I'm thinking I should have just handed that whole monthly theme over to you. Why am I sitting here talking about packing and shipping when you've been in 4 or 5 different countries doing that?
No, at least I have not been trying to ship my ceramics from there.
Oh my gosh. This is what's so fascinating, right? Because now, had we not had this whole conversation, I think most people, for people who do know your work already, are going to look at you as this person who has this big Instagram following and makes a crap ton of herb strippers.
I do make a lot of herb strippers. That just kind of just came up. And I was making mugs. And the thing is with me, I think with some potters you look at and they make a certain amount of things, or they only make mugs, and there's a style that's so specific to them. And I'm trying things all over the place. I'm trying so many different glazes and different things. That to me is fun. Different techniques. I hand build, I throw on the wheel. There's all kinds of things I'm always wanting to try. And the herb stripper came up, it was several years ago when I had the first idea of it. I've seen them before, the flat herb stripper. I'd never seen them connected to a bowl. I'm sure they're out there. I'm sure I'm not the first person to make these, but I hadn't really seen them out there in ceramics connected to a bowl. So I played with that for a while. And just because it's easier for me, I have carpal tunnel. So I have to be careful after a whole day of carving or doing different things in the studio that I have to kind of schedule correctly so that I don't, cause any strain on my wrists and my hands and stuff. In stripping herbs, I've had some people comment, oh, well, you can just do it with your hands. And it's like, well, yes, but it's harder for me. So it's more adaptive for me to be able to run it through the hole and have it just drop into the bowl. So that's how I first started making them. And then when I started making videos about them, it kind of took on. So it took a little life of its own. But
Well, and was that kind of a random, it just blew up on its own, or you've kind of seen things grow over time?
it's been in bursts. When I first posted a video about it, I don't know, maybe it's 2 or 3 years ago, that all of a sudden there was this, oh, that's cool. I've never seen anything like that, and then a bit later, it was, I changed to the form a little bit. I was hand building them with textured slabs. Then I started throwing them. And then,
Well, hold up. You throw these?
no, I did. I was throwing them.
Okay, I was going to say, how?
I was throwing them. They're thrown as a bowl. And then I alter them. I cut them and then carve
Okay.
them. Then I was like, okay, that's taking me way too much time. So I threw the bowl shape and then I made a mold of it. So now I'm slip casting the base form of it. I still have to completely cut it, alter it, and then I carve each one. So that gives me more time to carve.
I was just thinking the altering time alone, if you were throwing all of those, I was like, wait.
Yeah, that was not working for me. I'm not fast on the wheel.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, keep going. I needed a pause in that moment because when people go to look at the work, I'm like, that doesn't make sense.
I know. So if you look back at the very first ones I used to make, those were textured slabs. And you could tell sometimes they're a little wonky, but they were fun, And then there was a period, if you really kind of look through, if you're able to kind of look at those pictures, you can see some that were definitely thrown and they're slightly different kind of shapes. And now they're all the same because I've taken my thrown form, made a mold of it prior to altering. So it's still kind of the full tall bowl shape. And then I have to go back and alter and then make the holes and then carve them. So, and it's funny with Instagram, I feel like sometimes you happen to see something but the biggest thing is reposting. So when something, when one of the videos of the herb strippers got reposted, all of a sudden it kind of went nuts. I ended up having to make an email list to let people know because people kept DMing me and, when are you going to have them? Why don't you have them on your site? And it's like, well, usually the way I've done things is I make what I can make and then I have an update, and that just keeps me a little more sane because I'm not full time in the studio. We have a lot of other things going on. And I also have a business where I do some laser cutting and jewelry making and other things too. So try to balance it all. But pottery is my biggest one, my biggest passion.
It was funny. I forget when we were chatting about something, an issue, and maybe it was about shipping or something in the community that you all of a sudden were like, well, for my laser cutting. And we were like, wait, what? Like, by the way, I've also got this going on.
So it actually started with connected to pottery. So when I first saw these laser cutters, I was like, ooh, I can make my own texture mats because you can engrave on the rubber or whether it's on wood or anything. I was like, I can make my own stamps. And then I was thinking, well, I can make some support pieces for my pots. So whether it is a travel mug with a cool, leather engraved personalized sleeve that goes on it or something like that. I was thinking I could, kind of set myself apart by having some connected pieces like that. And after I got it, I was having so much fun with it. I never even made anything for pottery. It was all of a sudden I was making, and why I started a second business right before Christmas, I have no idea. But hey,
we are too alike. We are way too alike.
It paid for itself, in the first 6 weeks of making ornaments. So I made ornaments, jewelry. I made earrings and wooden things and acrylic things and leather and
well, and so most of your selling has been on Etsy, right?
yes, everything has.
Up to this point?
Up to this point, yeah.
When did you start selling your work?
I started pottery in 2018 and it was, let's see, I want to say it was like November of that year. I started posting some things on Instagram, but I wasn't selling yet. And there was a competition going on in Texas called Texas Works. And I think I posted something. It was a berry bowl or something. And one of the guys that it was part of the Texas Works commented on and said, you should enter this in Texas Works. So I went to look and see what it was. I was like, let me look at that. And I decided at the last minute to enter a whiskey pour set, so it was like the decanter and the whiskey cups that I carved. And so it was literally at the last minute, but you had to have the business had to be open. They had to be available to the public. So that's what started my business. I was sitting in an airport and I was delayed on a flight and it was due at midnight that night. And I thought, okay, I have to come up with a name for my business. I have to, and then I had a couple of weeks after that, after at least the submission, that I could start my Etsy store and have those available for sale and everything. There was kind of a date where I could do that by. So I still had a couple of weeks after that, but it was like, oh, I need to come up with, a name for my business and just start this. And that was the big, fire under my backside to kind of get me started. And I didn't really have a lot of time to think about whether it was the right thing to do or, is this the right time? Is my work good enough? I just did it. And I've learned a lot since, but it was a great start. So Texas Works went really well. I won first place in the category for that, but not in the whole competition, but in the category, which was really exciting. So it's the first thing I had ever entered. The only thing I've ever entered my work in. So that was fun. But that's kind of the way it started. It just was, okay, well, and I think if that hadn't had a deadline for me to do that, I might not have really started my business then. And that was right about the time Diamond Core Tools saw one of my videos and reposted it. And my numbers on Instagram went up and just some of the up close carving videos and stuff. And some of that kind of shaped the direction I went in, that it was because for me, the work that I do and the carving that I do, it's like meditation for me. That, being up in my studio is like, that's the best therapy for me. And the best mindfulness practice is that when I'm carving, my mind can't be anywhere else, really. I mean, I just have to let everything go and I have to kind of concentrate. And I've had to teach myself too that it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be, okay, so this carving was a little closer to the line than the other one, or that's okay. But I could let everything else go and just kind of concentrate and be in the moment. And those kind of videos seem to be doing that for some other people as well, at least from what, people have DM'd me and told me that it was very calming, for them to watch those. So I started making some more videos like that. That's how that started.
That's a true recovering graphic designer of like, oh, I'm a millimeter off. I should probably redo it. Like people have to understand, we got a degree in something that literally I had critiques on the spaces between individual letters. Like,
yes,
there's a word for that, you guys.
Yes.
Like
Kerning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're kerning and you're letting.
Yes.
Like these are the things that we have been taught to obsess over, and no wonder we have mental.
Well, and for me, and because I'm older than you are, it wasn't a matter of just getting on the computer and hitting a button to change where a line was or change the kerning or the letting. We were doing some of that too. Was when Apple first kind of started. I had one of those, those Apple boxes that people make fun of with the little screen and So, but it wasn't as easy. We could print something out, not in color, but in black and white and paste it up if we wanted to change spacing and things like that. So we had to really be aware and be on point with stuff like that. Yeah, it has kind of been a good lesson for me to let some of that go too, because I can be way too particular about that. And be way too bothered that something is a millimeter off. And, that's okay. It doesn't have to be exactly. And in fact, if you want it to be exact, if anybody's going to go and measure my lines, well, they can go buy something at Walmart or Target that was printed instead of handmade.
This brings up a good subject of what we deem as like seconds.
Yes.
Or not. I want to come back to that, but I want to put a pin in that for now because what I'm laughing about and also nodding along about and all of the positive emotions is the fact that you started your business because there was this outside force giving you a deadline.
Yes.
And you just had to do it. And that you didn't have it all figured out.
No.
Correct me if I'm wrong,
No.
but like nothing was figured out, right?
Right.
Like you just grabbed it. It can be as simple, like in order to get started, in order to have that momentum, it really can be as simple as get the name on Etsy and have a link. And that's it for now.
So it's funny because I was like, okay, this needs to get done. And I'm pretty good with, figuring out Instagram and Facebook and stuff, but I'd never done Etsy. So I grabbed my niece, who is a graphic designer. I was like, Jessie, you need to help me. So we sat down, side by side, and she just was, okay, let's figure out, I came over with my computer, what was my header going to be, and just she just walked me through it so that, I mean, I could have done it, but it just helped to have somebody, do it with me. It's funny because when you talk about some of that and kind of the way it started, and when I was hearing myself talk about, my lines being worried about whether they're too close together and stuff. A lot of that I think comes from me being self-taught. And, before I started again, I spent a lot of time. In fact, my husband used to be like, "You are always on your phone." I'm like, "I know, but I'm scrolling through it. I'm like looking at all these potters." And it was something I had never experienced before because I was not on social media and I didn't have that as I was learning. And I learned more in a short period of time by just how generous and gracious, potters are to make these videos and post their things and teach people, how they're doing something or, what technique they're using. And then sometimes if you want to know more, you take their workshop or, whatever that might be. But there was a lot of generosity out there. But sometimes there is a feeling of, okay, I know these people also got their degree in ceramics. They went through these courses and they were taught, the proper ways of doing everything and might even have their masters in it. And, how should I say this? I mean, I feel very good about the work I do. So, I'm not trying to say that I don't, but it can kind of creep into the back of your mind sometimes of, well, they should be charging that much because they went to school for this and they've studied so hard to do this. And, it's trying to figure out how to put that. But
yeah, it feels like, oh, if we don't have a piece of paper, a certificate from an institution that tells us we're official,
right.
Somehow it's less than, even though, if you've taken 3 years to ideate around a singular object and tweaked designs and updated it and improved it and improved it and improved it, odds are it's probably still just as good, regardless of having a certificate, a diploma framed on the wall.
I think that might have been some of my hesitation with getting started in my business. And it was great to have that one real big push. Okay, you need to do this. And to have somebody who was heading up a competition for something say, hey, this piece is good enough. You really should enter this. And so it was just that little bit, that pushed me over the edge that I needed, that really, that helped. And I still, I don't know, I think I wouldn't be the person that I am as a potter if I didn't go through all those years of teaching myself. And I try to share as much as I can. And I remember my sister asked me one time, why do you give so much information? You were telling people like exactly what glazes you use and stuff. I'm like, because I could give them I could show them exactly what I do, tell them exactly what their commercial glazes. I didn't come up with them, so exactly what glazes I do. They have a different style. They have a different kiln environment. They're not going to look exactly like mine. And if they do, well, good for you. It's, I don't know if you could really, copy it exactly, but really everybody's kind of got their own flair on something and we all take inspiration and it helps teach us. And then we change things to be our own. And so, I was just so thankful for the people who shared things with me when I needed them that, whatever I can share to help, I enjoy doing. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I loved what you said about even just working with your niece on Etsy. It does remind me so much of the community and why so many makers are in there.
Yes.
Is that very notion of having someone there with you. Like, it's not that you couldn't have figured out Etsy on your own, but just having that
little confidence boost.
Yeah, not just accountability necessarily, but just like knowing that there's somebody else there if you get stuck on something that they can help figure it out.
Well, and she's done it before. She was showing me, she wasn't doing it necessarily for me. She was kind of showing me and I was able to ask questions. And yeah, I mean, I wish I had the community back then. But what's nice, as a little plug for the community, I mean, what's nice about that, as opposed to, the Facebook groups are great and stuff, but they're big and not everybody feels super comfortable sometimes asking a question. It's like, ooh, that might be, come across as a dumb question or something. And that is something the community has that I think is a little bit different, is it's not this endless, group of people. We're all kind of a little family and it's a very safe space to ask questions and feel good about, about doing that or giving advice or answers or, hey, this is what's worked for me. And knowing that, maybe it helped, maybe it didn't, but, we're all open to having those discussions, which is great.
That was my exact experience, whether it be with Facebook groups for photography or as I've gotten more and more into ceramics as well, is like when it's fine to crowdsource massive groups and ask like, oh, if you crowdsource the question, Where do you go for packaging materials? Where do you go for boxes, even specifically? Asking that to a room of 1,000 people, you're asking a really specific question. And so it's easy to get helpful, specific answers. But when you start to ask more of at this point, every topic we've had has just showed how intertwined every single layer is, right? As we've started talking about pricing is like, okay, well, actually this involves more marketing now. And now we have to talk about branding and customer service and like you can't have, I shouldn't say can't. It is very difficult to have that in-depth of a conversation in a crowdsourcing environment.
As we discuss things like that, it does bring up things that we might do for the next month, some ideas, and we can talk about it. It's harder, I think, when you've got, say, thousands of people in a group on so many different levels and stuff to try to decide on, what's next month's, theme going to be or something.
If there is a theme.
Yeah. If we were trying to follow the same thing you are in the community, and it's not where, I could ask, but I don't, go on there to say, how do you make this or something? It's more of a, kind of on the business side of learning some things that I don't know how to ask in other places. There were some things that we were able to discuss about, whether it's Instagram or packing or something. And we talked about the packing stuff. I am making I'll say this first. I'm making a transition, trying to be more earth conscious and get away from bubble wrap and things like that. But I would have never been able to say some of the comments that I was about how I felt about bubble wrap and plastic and how good they were for my pots and everything in some other communities. And because I know that I would have just gotten a barrage of comments about how awful that is and everything. That's like, no, but I am transitioning. I am moving to eco-friendly packaging and everything. But there's just, I don't know, it's a safer space.
Yay.
So I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Well, and that's definitely the goal. I was trying to find a way to kind of embrace this crazy power that the internet has in terms of, we've got makers in there who are coming in from Ireland and Belgium and the Caribbean and all over the place. And that's the amazing thing about the internet, that you can bring so many people together. But for my experience, at least in past groups, is like needing that intentionality around like some ownership, some commitments to values and respect and all of that, but then also a little bit more focus instead of just the general like, okay, here's a group and you can post whatever you want as you want, but then at least having some of those monthly themes to help guide conversation and help us all kind of move along. Because getting back to the actual story here, having that deadline of joining that competition, that forcing you to start an Etsy, that's to me kind of the monthly themes in a way of like, if someone's looking for a deadline, if someone's looking for that, like, what do I focus on next month to actually get my business side hustle started? Yeah. You can do that, or you can just have a whole different conversation if you want, because that works too.
Well, and, for me, I know for my pottery business, not my laser business, I will migrate away from Etsy and have my own website at some point. But to me, that's almost as scary as that jump of first starting Etsy for the first time, was like, oh, which platform do I get? And, and I tend to overthink and over research and and then to the point where I don't make a decision. And so I'm, just because it's comfortable where I'm at. But I know it was you that said to me once, well, wait, if most of your customers on Etsy are coming, that big of a percentage are coming from Instagram or wherever, you're bringing those customers in and they're not finding you through Etsy, then you should move away, have your own website. And that was the first time I went, oh yeah, I guess that really gave me like a parameter of, oh, okay, if this percentage of your customers are coming from outside of Etsy that you're bringing there, then yeah, she's right. I need to have my own website. So now I really need to seriously look at, what it's going to be.
You can. You don't need to.
No,
you
don't
can
need
choose
to.
whatever you want to choose.
It's, because being on Etsy's just, people can think whatever they want to, about Etsy. It's comfortable for me right now. Yep. It's easy.
It's easy.
I know how to do it. They take care of all the financial side of it. If there's, I know exactly what the percentage is going to be. There's not hidden fees or anything. And there's shipping fees. Sometimes if I sell something on the side, I'll go through Pirate Ship. But Etsy, it's very equivalent to their discounted shipping fees and things. I know how to use it. And so it's comfortable for me. So.
Yep. Well, and I'm just going to own the fact that we're going to talk a lot about the community in the rest of this conversation, and everybody, you're just missing out. But come join. You're not missing out because it's open to everyone.
Right.
But again, coming back to those layered depths of conversation is there's nothing bad. Like, you don't have to move, but
Right.
it's thinking through the critical thinking of Etsy in and of itself is a search platform. So if you don't need the search possibility of it, right? If people are buying your stuff not by searching herb stripper, but by clicking a link in your Instagram link, that's a very different place to be than like for myself and Francesco, who aren't doing anything except keeping the inventory of giant mugs up and kicking in Etsy and seeing reasonable return for that. It's a completely different process.
And it's a place where people go. I think a lot of people feel safe going there and finding an artist that, sells on Etsy because they've heard of Etsy, they know Etsy. And for my laser business, for selling ornaments or little wooden earrings or whatever, most of the orders that I get through that is from Etsy or from searches on Etsy. So, not from Instagram and stuff. So that's different. I wouldn't have been able to, have that if it weren't for Etsy. So, in the searches that people are going out and looking for Christmas ornaments or personalized things, I think those kind of personalized things, Etsy makes it very easy.
That's the perfect example of being able to have the information to think through what decision makes the most sense for what I want to do, for where things are coming from, for what's, phase in life, ease of like all of this is the most difficult thing. Like we need the context of everyone, right? We need to crowdsource a question or a suggestion when somebody goes on those big those big groups and says, what platform should I host my website on? And everybody just starts throwing in answers. And I'm the person who comes in and goes, well, hold on. Like what? Are you full-time? Are you part-time?
Right.
Are you comfortable navigating tech issues? Do you know how to code? Do you not? Do you want to?
See, that's my thing is I feel like I'm pretty tech savvy, can, learn how to do anything, but it's like, I'm one person. I have only a certain amount of time, in a day, along with, other things for family and stuff that I have to do and that I want to do. And there's a lot of things I want to do. So I'm doing my pottery, I'm doing my laser stuff, I'm dabbling in, alcohol inks and, fun things that I want to have fun with. And, I would love to have a resin printer. I want to learn, but I don't know how to do, I don't know how to design for a resin printer, but, okay, I can use Adobe Illustrator. So why can't I, learn how to do that? Yes, I'd have to spend time doing that. And it's like, okay, do I really have the time, to put in to build a website? And so when I already have my stuff on Etsy, and granted, there's nothing in my Etsy store right now because like I had said before, I make things. And once I've accumulated what I find to be enough pieces, then I have an update and do it that way. But it's comfortable for me because then I also weigh that like, well, even if it's just a few hours or whatever, it would be more than that because I'd have to figure out not just how to create the website, but I would have to redo, pictures and figure out the design side of all of that, because I also have a certain aesthetic in mind and I'm, like I've said before, pretty particular. And I would probably spend entirely too much time, figuring how to design things and where my text is going to be and exactly what typeface it's going to be and the size and exactly, my photos and all of that. And so I have to decide where to put my time. Because, I come back to your podcast with Becca of thinking, okay, there's only so many hours in a day, as a solopreneur.
Well, and having then the resources to just make that conscious decision, right? There's nothing wrong about selling on Etsy, but at least now you've gone down the road of like, oh, okay, like I'm making this decision because of this reason or this set of reasons, and that's what works in my life. And at least for me, I find once I'm making decisions like that, when the world starts yelling at me that Etsy is the devil and you need to get off and I can stand firm in that decision because it's like, well, I've thought through, I know why I made my decision. And so that's okay. And until something starts to tip over that decision, I'm okay with it rather than feeling like, oh, I should be doing this or, oh, I should be, oh, I should.
And that's hard. That's hard not to jump on that bandwagon of, oh, I should be doing this, as that's kind of what the wave of people are pushing you towards in a way. But I've had
Mhm.
to just look at what am I doing? What's right for my business? And what can I actually do and complete in a day, in a week, in a month, or whatever that also brings me joy. I have to still enjoy what I'm doing and not feel like I'm drowning in, special orders that I don't enjoy doing or something and I have the luxury to do that. I have to say I'm so thankful that my husband supports my business 1,000%. He's always helped me, build things for it and stuff. My business supports itself and then some, but we'll still eat and the lights will still be on, because of him. So, I can make some of those decisions and I'm very grateful to be in that position.
Yeah. And thank you for mentioning that, because obviously we're saying this where the 6.5% Etsy takes
Right.
for someone who is paying their own health care
Right.
might be a life-changing percentage.
Absolutely.
Then the 3 hours of website maintenance every week or whatever, I'm just making up time, but that time then might be
Oh, that makes a
best
huge
spent that
difference.
way,
Yeah. I mean, because
Yeah.
and I guess what I was looking at too is I'm not a production potter. I don't put out a ton of work quickly. And so, that 6.5% for somebody who that's all they do and they make a lot of work and they're having their updates often or getting, making orders and stuff is going to be a lot larger than the annual fee they might pay for a website. Or something that,
Mhm.
that the fee makes a huge difference. It's now for me, it's not equal anymore. The 6.5% is bigger. So that's another reason why, I think at some point when I have a little bit more time, maybe not right before a holiday, I will.
Maybe not.
No.
Don't do this in November, please.
That's what I did last year was I started my laser business in like October and I was doing that and pottery. And it was like, I'm not doing that again. Even though, I mean, they were both very successful. It was great and all, but I had a lot of sleepless nights and that's not what I'm after. I need to get a good night's sleep. But it was fun too. I've got to say with the laser business, I think what really took me with that, and especially coming off of COVID and everything was I was
Mm.
making these ornaments they were memorial ornaments for people who had passed. And
Mm.
I got it was just, I got over 300 orders for these ornaments. And because they were personalized, so I could put something on the back, it had a nice saying on the front, they were hand painted and everything. And then on the back, you could put whatever you wanted, whether it was, a name and a date or something as a reminder of somebody who had passed. And it kind of hit me like, wow. I mean, a lot of these people were people who had passed in 20 and 21, and whether it was COVID or not, I don't know. Some were older, some were younger, but I got so many messages on how special it was and how important it was and stuff that I kind of put everything on hold. And that was where a lot of the sleepless nights came from, is that I just kept renewing that, putting more out there. So, I would say, okay, between now, because I can make another 40, and I would kind of renew my listing for 40 more pieces, and so anyway, it felt good to do. So I did that last year.
I'm going to take us on a right turn here and ask you a question that is probably going to make you roll your eyes, but also you probably get asked all the time when people do go to your Instagram and they do see, and so you're saying it's kind of come in spikes.
Yes.
Do you feel like those spikes have made a meaningful difference in the work you're selling or how much you're selling?
Oh,
or
no
do you
doubt.
feel like
I do feel like it has. And those have come in waves as well. I mean, it's not like all of a sudden overnight, I had another 1,000 followers or something. And, and having more followers doesn't mean you sell more work.
That was my question. That was a better way of phrasing what I was asking. Yeah. Because I think that's the perception, right? That's the solution to all the things, is to get to 10,000 or 30,000 or whatever the number is.
Yeah. That's not going to, quote, make you more successful. I mean, I have a lot of followers, but I think a lot of them, it has come from the carving videos that people find relaxing or satisfying, whatever. Because I was picked up by the account So Satisfying on Snapchat. And they asked permission, could we use these videos and stuff? It's like, yeah, well, I know when they come up on Snapchat, or so because I get new followers and stuff. And I know it's people who are just wanting to see more videos. They aren't necessarily wanting to buy my things, but maybe there was one person who said, oh, I found you on So Satisfying on Snapchat, and I would really love one of these mugs. When are you going to have another update, or something? And so that's a one in I don't know how many, but so more followers doesn't necessarily mean, more sales, but it has been more sales for me in waves, So the herb strippers have been a huge success for me. Not always. I mean, in the beginning, maybe not, but I think it was one of the bigger, compilation accounts that Love in Pottery or something like that reposted them. And I just got, bombarded with questions of, this is cool. When are you going to have more? When are you going to have more? And so that prompted me, just like somebody prompted me to create my my Etsy store, it prompted me to figure out how to do a mailing list. I was like, oh, what's a landing page? I had no idea what a landing page was. So I had to kind of learn, okay, I can have my link on my bio that will go to a landing page that will let somebody sign up for a newsletter. Well, I use the term loosely of newsletter, but will let me email them when I'm going to have an update, because I have to acknowledge with Etsy, you cannot collect their information and send them things. Those are not your customers when you're on Etsy. Those are Etsy's customers. So if they're from Etsy or Instagram or whatever, if they would like to go to my Instagram and then sign up for my newsletter, then they become people that I can contact. And, I'm not going to flood their inbox or anything. But when I am about a week ahead of time, when I am going to have a sale, then I'll send people information on the date and time and stuff like that. So, which is much easier. I had so many people saying, well, will you let me know when, when you're going to have a sale, and and it's like, well, I can't DM every person who asks me that. So I found myself telling people, well, watch my Instagram, because about a week ahead of time, I start posting about it. And then 4 or 5 days ahead of time, I'll post kind of almost like a little poster with the date and time. And then I'll have a preview 24 hours before of exactly, with the prices and everything of what I'm going to sell. But I found I'm losing probably a lot of customers that way, because people won't remember or they won't have happened to see my story or something like that. So I was like, okay, I need to buckle down and figure out how to do this email list.
This reminds me, I think when you were initially thinking about email lists, I think that's how you and I very first started talking, is because I was probably talking about the importance of email lists on some story or something, because I pointed out, like, a landing page is great because it's automating things. But in the beginning, literally all you have to do is ask people for their email address. And then, yes, it takes more of your time. It's more manual. You have to add it into a system. But at least in the beginning, all you have to do is just get their email address.
And that's how I started. And I think it was because of you. That's how I started. Is I was like, okay, just DM me your email. And I'm starting a list and, people will be able to sign up on their own soon. But if you DM me your email address, I'll put you on my list. And I just started copying and pasting them into a form. And then pretty soon I had figured out how to do MailChimp, and then, there's a variety of different ones out there. But anyway,
I've got to really figure out, we've got to dig deeper at some point, or it's going to be another theme or something about what it is. I think for all of us, we always need that push. We always need that, like, that thing that comes to a head, the competition where you had the deadline,
right?
Or the push to need, like, and I think this is true for everybody. And I think it's also why so many makers live in that space of dreaming and research and dreaming and research. But then the research starts to get stressful, and because it's not an action that's actually being taken and moving forward. And really, I mean, the thing I'm just hearing over and over again from you is it's really just getting started. Put yourself out there, and then you'll figure out the next step, right? You've got to take one step first.
Well, I felt like I was a bystander. Yeah. I was happy being the bystander for a while and just watching, these people who I was so convinced they're so much better than me. And I'm in this mode of learning from them. So I'm not taking that step forward. And I was comfortable. Just kind of, well, I haven't done it in 10 years. My wheel's been in storage for 10 years, and in the same crate that it was shipped back from Indonesia and, sitting in our barn. So it was like, okay, I was too comfortable and I needed that push. And, each kind of step I've gone, I've needed that kind of little push, and it's been great for me. So some of us do kind of, we kind of need that.
I think we all do. I think it's just a matter of figuring out ways to give it to ourselves if we want things to go faster, right? And maybe that is having a community. Maybe that's having self-imposed deadlines that you actually stick to, or...
Well, that's what, and that month that we had the time management, information stuff that we talked about one month was great for me because I needed that too. But also, I'm not a business person. I've had to kind of take the time to go and figure some of this out, whether it's research or talking to people or whatever it is. I've learned a lot from whether it's podcasts, like this, and somebody, has said that they've done something. It's like, oh, well, that's how they did it. Okay, well, maybe I can do that too, but I've kind of needed that. I needed a little push because I'm out of my comfort zone. But at the time, it was like, okay, well, if you're in my wheelhouse, which is why I picked Juliette's wheelhouse. But if I'm in my wheelhouse, I'm comfortable, but get me out of that, it's like, ooh, okay, I need to take some time and just sit and watch and observe for a little while. And and that's how I started. That's why I'm also so appreciative of, social media and whether it's YouTube or whatever, is that I can sit and observe for a while and soak it all up and then think, okay, what can I take from that that's important to me? How can I change, some of these ideas and apply them to what my end goal is and see how I can change. Okay, yeah, that's something I can learn how to do. Okay. And people have talked about newsletters and I kind of pushed it away. Like, okay, well, no, I don't really need one. I don't really sell that much, or I don't know. I could come up with a reason of why I didn't do it. And then all of a sudden, okay, this is dumb. I'm really losing, people who might potentially enjoy my work or whatever, because I don't have a way to just let them know. It's like, okay, that's easy enough. I should be able to do that. But I originally found you, though, through your photography stuff. I think it was the cheat sheet that you had. Yeah. It was like your story or something that came across. And I was like, wait, and photography has always been a passion of mine, too. We used to have, I had my own black and white enlarger and dark room and stuff way back before, when it was still film and everything. So Anyway, I've dabbled in a little bit of everything, but I've always really wanted to learn more about photography and stuff. And you had that, I don't know, that's how I found you. But anyway, it was that, the Potter element, because there aren't that many, well, there aren't any that I know of photographers out there that also have a photography background. There were product photographers that would show whether it's food or, something that they could, but pottery was different. So that's how I clicked on you and I was like, oh, this is cool. Ooh, I really like her.
We still have the cheat sheet for anybody who's going to ask. You can still get it. I'll put the link in the show notes because you can still get it. Don't worry, it still exists. It's free.
But that's how I found you originally.
That's amazing. Well, yeah, and a lot of the product photography examples out there, there's some that I follow because they literally show you everything they're doing, which is amazing. But the catch that I found for a lot of makers is that they're using a lot of equipment. They're using a lot of lighting, a lot of gear, a lot of studio stuff, which like I can watch and understand what they're doing.
Well, I took a studio photography class, and I've done all the product photography with the massive lights and and one of the assignments we had, which kind of related to pottery, was when this was on a medium format camera and everything. It's all just different, but we had to photograph something that reflective, that was chrome. And so had to build this whole thing around it of this white tissue paper and stuff that would diffuse the light. But it was all the massive equipment that they had at the school. So that was not stuff that we have, in our little studio.
Nor should you have to buy all of that. You don't need all of that to take decent photos of pottery. It's just not necessary. So I digress. So that's a whole nother conversation. But I do think I'm just going to put this out into the world. I'm like pointing at you with my pen now.
With my wine glass. Which, by the way, you were supposed to have, but you're going to Pilates, so that's okay.
It was. I know I was supposed to have wine.
That's okay.
Apologies. I think I might pull rank on 1 month of a monthly theme in the community and talk all about email newsletters, because the first step is just getting a list and getting started. And I know most makers kick off with like, okay, a week before I'm going to tell you about my shop update. But as we just talked about on the live, I was like, that's a little bit like meeting somebody you like at a bar, not talking to them for a month, and then texting them and being like, so you want to sleep over?
So you said that in the community, and I've got to laugh about that because you gave me the best idea that has been going around in my head of what to do. It's like, well, I don't want to flood their inbox with all kinds of stuff. And you were like, but, what if for your herb strippers you sent like some cool recipe or something and kind of let people know you were working on them? And I was like, oh. I mean, because I always thought I was only going to send it. Don't worry, I'm not going to flood your inbox. I'm only going to email you a week before I'm going to have an update, with the date and the time and everything. But you're right. I mean, these are people I want to have a connection with and want to, keep talking to and not meet them one night. Yeah. And then, 6 months later, ask them to have a sleepover when they haven't heard from me.
Whenever I talk about marketing and sales, I always bring it back to relationships because that's really what it is at the
Yeah.
end of the day. And everybody more or less can kind of understand that metaphor to where it's like it's hilarious, but it's also a very like straightforward
I hope it's
metaphor.
all about relationships for, for other potters. I mean, there is nothing better than seeing somebody use, I mean, I make all functional work, and to have somebody post a picture of them actually using one of your pieces, having it be in use, it's like, oh, that's so cool, and there are even, people from when I first started, that I remember the lady who bought one of my very first, when I say my black and white carved, if you went and looked at a lot of my stuff, you would know what I'm talking about of the lines, and they kind of make these
Mhm.
triangles. It's an African design. It's not my design. But
Mhm.
anyway, the very first lady who bought it, and became one of my best customers. I mean, she lives in Colorado. We've never met, but we DM'd a lot of time. And she will send me
Yeah.
pictures of them in use. And it's like, yay. That there is nothing better, that feels good. So those connections with people are really important, and they're important to me. And I would love to get a picture or hear from every single person who's ever used one of my pieces, because when I put my hands on clay, that's a part of me. I mean, that's, I'm not just zip, 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 I mean, it takes me a while to make it. I put a lot of time and thought and energy into, even the little herb strippers. Every carving
Yep.
pattern is slightly different. And it's like whatever is in my mind at that moment is what gets carved. And so that's a little
Yep.
part of me that gets sent out every time I'm sending those somewhere. So it's really cool. It's cool to make those connections with people.
Yeah, and really everything we're talking about is just a matter of allowing it to be a two-way street,
Yes.
like them connecting with you and you connecting with
Right.
them both. But I could talk about that forever. Maybe I'll do another episode or we'll do a month in the community all about it.
Just talk. So just send me down another avenue and we'll just keep talking. And
I know, right? Well, I am conscious of how much time I told you this was going to take, and you probably do have all the carving of all of the things to still do. So, ending with a small question, that's a lie. Is there something you feel like people don't know or you wish they knew? Or, because I feel like so much of us interact with other makers or other people on something as remedial as Instagram, and a lot gets lost in that. So either a question you get asked all the time that you want an audio clip to send people the answer for, or whatever it might be.
But you said it was a little question.
I know I lied. Bold-faced lie.
As far as something that I want people to know about me, I don't know. I think I feel forever thankful and grateful for having the ability to do this and do this as a job. And every time I sink my hands in clay, it's just kind of like and I love watching people do what they love, on Instagram and stuff too. So I appreciate all of the time and effort that people put into their videos and their pictures. When I first got onto social media and first kind of got back into pottery after that 10-year break, just how appreciative and thankful I was to the people who do take the time to put out videos and teach people how to do things like that, because I learned so much. And so I am usually open to when somebody asks me how I've done something or what tools I use, or I'm very open to discussing that. So if you have a question, ask me. If I can get to it, I will. I mean, if there's 1,000 questions, it might take me a little bit of time, but really, I am all up for talking about whatever tools I use, whatever, because I spent so much time teaching myself and not having somebody to ask questions to. I mean, I take that back. We had a very small group of people in Indonesia that, there were 4 of us expat wives who had different kind of backgrounds in something clay related, and we did one day, somebody taught us about, how to make glazes. And basically, it was how to follow a recipe, but not the why or the how or anything, but basically just how to do it, because we couldn't get commercial glazes there, or somebody, did a raku thing or something. But it was like a one-day workshop kind of thing. But for the most part, I didn't have somebody to ask those questions to. So having this avenue in social media to ask questions, and I'm sure there are people that are hesitant to ask other makers how they've done something or what they've used or what tool is that, or, what's your favorite carving tool or something like that, I am really willing to share as much as I can, and share everything, but honestly, really as much as I can. And, because that's what I was so thankful for. So if I can help anybody out, then I'm willing to do so. I don't know if that really answered your question. There's no big thing of, about me that people don't know. I mean, I'm married. I have 2 kids. I have 2 fabulous adult children, 1 boy and 1 girl. And my daughter's married to a great guy. And, that's where I spend my time, is with family outside of the pottery stuff. And so as far as anything, people don't know about me, that would be it.
Awesome. It was open-ended. There is no right or wrong.
There were so many ways I could answer that. So I don't know.
I know. All within, just a couple minutes. No big deal. Meaning of life, not a problem.
Oh, yeah. Just do that in 90 seconds. I was going to say 30 seconds, but 90 seconds sounded better. But I did make my own wine glass. So.
Look at you. Now I'm going to need a picture of that to share.
We're going to have to do this again when you're not going off to exercise or something, and we can have.
Well, now we were joking about, I was saying, it's only audio, but I'm using some of the video clips to try and share a little bit better on Instagram. And in comes Juliette with full hair and makeup done. And I'm like, well, I guess I should have.
There's going to be.
I guess I should have tried a little bit more.
Well, it's funny. I mean, through, whether it was through COVID or, I don't know, whatever else. So I don't get out much sometimes. So it's like, I should put a little makeup on and
I know. I'm like, well, I just put on glasses to make it look like it looks significantly. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Anytime.
I appreciate
Happy
it.
to.
For people who have not actually seen all of your work on the internet, where do you want them to come and find you?
So probably the best place to see most of my work is on Instagram. So that's just my full name. No spaces, dots, or stops or anything. It's just Juliette Davin, Juliette Davin.
Perfect. Fabulous. And I will link it in the show notes. Okay, clearly we are only having a little bit of fun over in the community. And while Juliette obviously has her own unique story, I have to say, the enthusiasm she brings to helping others is a common trait of so many of the other makers inside the community. If you've been looking for a place to connect with other makers online in a more intentional way than those absolutely huge Facebook groups, which are great in their own way, but for me personally, a little bit overwhelming, come check out the community by visiting makersplaybook.com/community. Inside, you'll find makers from all over the world, full-timers and side hustlers, newbies, and people with decades of experience, everything in between, chatting, brainstorming, troubleshooting, and supporting each other together around many of the topics that plague all of our thoughts. How to price your work, how to deal with yet another Instagram update, how to get started even, so much more. If your hands are covered in mud right now, don't worry. There's a link in the show notes, which you can find in the description of this episode on whatever app you're listening to this podcast on. This episode has been sponsored by Amico. You may have noticed that Amico isn't taking direct orders on their website currently. And while that might seem like a bad thing, the reason for it is awesome. For the past 8 months, Amico has been focusing on supplying their distributors first. In other words, they're focused on making sure that your favorite local shops are supported even before their own website. And you can easily pick up your favorite glazes, like Potter's Choice Honey Flux or Rainforest Celadon, on the shelf of your local clay shop and avoid all those extra shipping costs. Naturally, high demand and supply issues have made it hard to keep stores stocked these days. But Amico is dedicated to supporting your favorite small businesses first, now, and in the future. And that, my friends, is putting your money where your values are, which I'm all about. If you don't yet have a favorite local shop, you can find an Amico distributor near you by visiting amico.com/dealers. Now, next week is our off week, my friends. I only publish new episodes here on the podcast 3 out of every 4 weeks, because on that 4th week, I send out our coveted free monthly photo tips newsletter. This month, I'm going to explain why I actually suggest starting out with photographing your work inside instead of outside. I know, it probably comes as a surprise to many of you. But frankly, who has time to wait around for Mother Nature? At least not those of us in the Midwest. If you want to snag this tip along with many more once a month, every month, visit makersplaybook.com/newsletter to sign up for our email list. Once more, that's makersplaybook.com/newsletter. Or, just click the link in the description once you wipe the mud off your hands. This has been a lot of URLs at the end of a podcast episode, so we'll just leave it at that. Until next time, my friends, go get back to making your dreams a reality. Because together, we've got this.